And who am I? That's not a secret I'll never tell. You know you love me. XOXO. Gossip Girl.
What's up? We got Gossip Girl, Season 5, Episode 11, End of the Affair. This episode starts off with Chuck, walking monkey in a rainy night. In the rain at night. He runs into Louis, who's walking alone without an umbrella. Chuck remarks that he wasn't aware Louis and Blair were home from Europe, and Louis replies that they've been back for 3 weeks. Chuck says that not being in the know of things, like that's the downside of not having Gossip Girl in the past few months since the accident. He also expresses the condolences of Blair losing the baby. Sad. Oh, just that hurt when I first watched it. And Chuck explains that she's now spending all hours planning the wedding. Chuck offers to walk Louis home, and he says yes as he shares his umbrella. In the past, Chuck and Blair arrive at the hospital on stretchers. Blair is awake and seemingly fine until she sees Chuck is breathing heavily from the side of his head, and then him passing out. In the present, as they arrive back at the Waldorf, Louis gives them towel. Once he's gone, Blair comes downstairs and notices Chuck. Upon seeing Blair, Chuck has a flashback of Kim kissing before the accident. Blair says that she knew Chuck would find a way to get to her. Chuck replies that he just wanted to be there for her after she lost the baby. She asks him to leave, citing that her need to keep her priorities straight before the wedding. Chuck asks why has she been cutting them out of her life without any explanation. Blair says there is no such thing as accident, and it was only the universe's way of showing them that what was really important. She tells Chuck to inform Louis that Bergdorf stayed open late for her to finish her registry and leave. In her flashback, Blair tells Chuck that she can't wait for them to spend the rest of her life with him, and they both say they love each other. In the present, Louis comes back in the room and gives Chuck a towel. He tells Louis what Blair said, and that it's probably just an excuse to avoid him. Louis sadly says no, and that her going out late is a regular habit. Chuck then asks why Louis was out in the rain, and he says he just wants to know what she's doing. He then mentions that she isn't talking to Serena much, and won't let the icon Dorota go with her anywhere. Louis explains that he thought that she was with Chuck, and now that he now wants to hire a private detective to find out what the truth is. Chuck says he has a better idea and goes to Dan's loft to see Dan. Dan lies and says that he's there to make sure Chuck lies and says that that he's there to make sure Dan doesn't fall into a literally stump. Dan remarks that when a slump. Dan says that he's grateful for his publisher gave him the contract for another book, but he can't come up with an idea for one. Chuck asks if he knew Blair was back in town, and Dan says no. Chuck explains Louis wants to hire a private detective, but he thinks Dan would be a better option. Dan refuses, saying it's unlikely Blair is having any affair, and if she was, he doesn't want to spy on her. Chuck assumes it's because Dan might be trying to hide something when Dan declines. Chuck says he'll be looking forward to a full report and leave. Once he's gone, Blair emerges from the... Once they leave, Blair emerges from the back of the loft and says to Dan that Chuck can never know the truth before hugging Dan. The next day, Dan arrives at the loft and finds Serena in the dining room. She asks if he's coming to the spectator party, and Dan says that Nate has fully forgiven him for the whole Derek and Inside thing, and he wouldn't miss a chance to support him. Serena asks him to help with the year-end review list, and begins with the biggest transformation section. Dan suggests suggesting her becoming a new blogger and all. Serena admits that the disappearance with Gossip Girl, people are just desperate for any form of gossip. Dan asks if Blair is there, and Serena says no. Again, Dan knows that Blair is with him, but he has to pretend like that she's not with him to hide suspicion. And she wouldn't let her accompany her to Vera Wang for her dress fitting. Nathan arrives and apologizes again. Nate arrives again about Inside not being on their best list. Dan says that he's busy with a new book, and both Nate and Serena suggest he writes something for far off from selling out his friends. Serena and Nathan leave to go off to meet the caterer for the party that evening. Dan goes on an errand, and at the Vanderwoods, Lily gets a call from Jenny. Remember Jenny? Yeah, Jenny's now unmentionable. Remember Jenny? Jenny calls from off-screen land saying hi. From London. Yeah, that's where Jenny went off-screen. She went to London. I guess she's still in London, I guess. Lily says it was nice having Jenny and Eric home for the Christmas off-screen. But part of her wish is that Charlie/Ivy would come home too. Nate says that Rufus made it that Charlie made it pretty clear that the Upper East Side was not for her, and she was a wreck after the accident because, yeah, she's the one that caused Blair and Chuck to get into the accident. Lily retorts that whenever she asks Carol, she always feels like she's not being let in on the whole truth because, yeah, you're Charlie is not really Charlie. She's Ivy, and we don't know where the real Charlie even is. So, yeah, of course you're not being let in the whole truth. Because Carol has been gaslighting you with an actress, con artist, struggling actress to pretend to be her daughter while her real daughter is to who knows where. At the Vera Wangs, Dan finds Blair crying in her wedding dress. She confesses tearfully that she can't get married in the dress, despite knowing it's beautiful and specially designed for her. But now all she can see is everything she's lost. Vera herself then comes out and asks if everything is okay. Blair lies and says yes, but Dan says she needs to get married in a different dress. Vera says she had a feeling and has some other choice pulled from the bag for Blair to see, which when she's gone, she asks why Dan came, and Dan says he came because it was until later. Whatever that means. And as he says, a woman watches them and then goes outside and calls Chuck. She tells him that Blair is at her fitting with a guy who's definitely not Louis. Chuck figures, yeah, it's Dan, and instructs his driver to head off to Vera Wang's. At the Spectator, Nate and Serena are making the year's best list. He notices a new email constantly coming in Serena's inbox, and she explains that ever since Gospel disappeared, everyone has been sending tips to her. She says that there must be 1,000 messages. And she hopes that if she ignores them long enough, people will get the hint. Nate suggests she read anyway, and elsewhere, Dan and Blair are walking about after their fitting. She asks why he's quiet, and he reminds her that she said he wasn't allowed to question her decisions to marry Louis. Dan decides to tell her that they need to reveal that they're hiding because Chuck and Louis are already becoming suspicious. Blair insists to keep it hidden as she doesn't know if she can live with the consequences if she doesn't. Dan offers her support and leads her to a private residence. Unnoticed to the both of them, Chuck is watching them from across the street. At Spectator, Nate is working on his best years list when he engages in a conversation with an anonymous person. The person says, "I thought you were a journalist with integrity." Nate says, "He is. Who's the person?" And the person says, "Not important. The important thing is the paparazzi didn't cause Blair and Chuck's accident. They did their research. Nate has to do his." Basically, yeah. Outside the private residence, Chuck calls Dan for an update on Blair. Dan informs him that he doesn't think Blair is engaging in suspicious activity, and the only person she's seeing is covertly Vera Wang. Chuck thanks Chuck thanks him. Wait, my thing is holding now. Thanks him for the effort and says the mission will not need to be completed. They hang up and Dan re-enters the building. While they walk away from the building, Chuck calls Louis and says they need to talk. He does so. As he does so, he's almost hit by a taxi. At the Waldorf, Serena comes to find Louis waiting for Blair. She asks if he's convinced her to come to the New Year's party that night, but he says no. She has declined every invitation she's received since being home. Chuck then arrives and announces Blair is having an affair with Dan. Serena refutes this, saying Dan told her he wasn't seeing Blair, and since she's been home. Chuck replies that, yeah, Dan's been lying to you, and that Dan's been lying, just like he did when he said Blair only went to Vera Wang's shop. Louis becomes annoyed at this, and that Chuck followed them, yet thought his idea of a PI was not good enough to pretend he didn't go. Chuck mentions that his driver took pics to show of Dan and Blair together. Louis agrees that it explains their absence, but Serena needs to actual proof they're sleeping together before they confront her about it. Serena's dumb, like literally. Chuck says Gossip Girl probably has the proof, but Serena says she isn't going to waste her time trying to find proof. She asks who they're welcome to do so, but Louis really needs to focus on getting Blair to come out and be people who care about her. Shut up, Serena. Serena's really annoying in the scene. Literally. Blair, there's something going on between Blair and Dan. Chuck, Blair, and Louis are trying to figure it out, but Serena's like, you guys should not. She doesn't care about the proof and tries to convince Louis to get Blair to come back. Serena, shut up. Let Blair and Chuck, let Louis and Chuck do their thing. Go be in a B plot or something. We don't need you in this scene. You're just too annoying, Serena. At the Vanderwoods, Rufus answers the phone to find Andrew Tyler, the PI, on the other end, while looking to talk to Lily. Andrew informs Rufus that his work is confidential, and Rufus promises to tell Lily he called. At the Spectator, Nate is reviewing paparazzi pictures from the night of the accident. He mentions to his assistant that he isn't sure they were close enough to run Chuck and Blair's car into the wall. She asks what the police said, and he says the front of the car was too damaged to inspect. And he says that he wants to talk to the driver himself. They invite him to the party. Back at the Vanderwoods, Lily's excited for New Year karaoke. Rufus informs her that, Andrew Tyler called about an assignment. Lily says she asked him to find Charlie and make sure she was okay. Of course, we know it's not Charlie, but yeah. She said she called him back and discovered she never left New York after all. Outside, Dan and Blair leave the private residence, and she's on the phone with Louis, again declining his offer to attend the spectator party. When they hang up, Dan convinces her to go by saying that she has to go to eventually get out, and he's sure she can fake being happy. Blair grudgingly accepts Louis' offer. Meanwhile, at the Waldorf, Chuck has found several photos in Serena's email of Dan and Blair together. Louis and Chuck debate how to handle confronting Blair, and decide to do it at the party where Dan and Blair will both be. At the party, Nate suggests Dan write his resolutions down and is hanging on their tree of resolutions they've set up. But Louis and Blair arrive, but Blair immediately heads to the restroom to freshen up. That's where Chuck shows Serena the proof of Dan and Blair sneaking around. Louis then approaches and says he saw Dan run the other way when Blair arrived. Serena says that the photos look bad, but still not proof they're doing anything other than talking. Again, Serena, you're dumb. Literally. They're showing you evidence, but you refuse to believe it. What a dumb person. They're showing you evidence that they have, or Chuck, yeah. They're showing you evidence that Blair and Dan are sneaking around, but Serena refuses to believe they're doing this. Like, there's proof. Serena, while this is making, wow, I thought the whole Charlie Ivy situation was making Serena dumb. This is, wow, is this dumb. This season making Serena a dumb. Making Serena dumb. I don't know what's going on with the writing this season, but basically, Serena's now an idiot now. She's basically an idiot because, yeah, she would 100%, but now she's like, oh, this just shows her talking. It doesn't show they're doing anything bad. Okay, Serena, I just don't know I don't know how to deal with her. She sees proof, but she doesn't want to believe it. Of course, she probably wants to have faith in Dan and Blair, of course. But to not suspect something, that's dumb. But anyway. Chuck says that her having an affair with Dan explains why Blair cut him off and isn't confiding in Serena. Frustrated, Serena heads off to ask Blair the truth, and when she's gone, Louis tells Chuck that if Serena alerts Blair, she can make sure Dan never says what's going on. Chuck agrees that Louis has the idea that they won't be able to lie about it in front of everyone. He goes to Nate's office and adds a new slide. The most secret affair to the slideshow. Nate's assistant enters and asks what Louis is doing. He lies that Nate left him in to use his computer to do some business and leaves. In the restroom, Serena finds Blair applying powder, and she asks Blair to tell her the truth about why she's been avoiding her. In the flashback, Blair will. When she woke up in the hospital to Serena telling her she lost the baby, or was that a doctor? I don't know. But anyway, she asks where Chuck is, and Serena is vague, explaining that he lost a lot of blood and he never woke up, so it's not looking good for him. Then it's showing Chuck's body rejecting his blood transfusion and is ultimately dying and needs another. Elsewhere, Blair prays to the heavens that Chuck won't die. She makes a promise to God that if he lets Chuck live, she'll keep her vow to marry Louis. After she's done, a nurse comes in for asking that Chuck is awake and is asking for her. She goes to his room and tells him that just because they can't be together doesn't mean she doesn't love him. After she finishes, Serena reminds her that nurse wasn't an angel and Chuck survived due to modern medicine. And also says that God would understand if Blair changed her mind. Blair answers that, yeah, she's just tired. To a flashback to earlier that day, showing Serena that Blair is attending church every day and Dan goes with her for support. She sees Father Smith, and thanks him for letting her have a key so she can escape at any hour to find Pete. While they talk, Dan receives a call from Chuck and goes outside to take it. While he's gone, Dan tells him that she saw Chuck that night before and she still loves him. But it's not fair that he's alive, but she feels dead without him. But Father Smith says if God will understand, she changed her mind, and he leaves her alone to speak with him. She goes to a window and witnesses Chuck almost being hit by the taxi. Yeah. Blair insists that she has to keep her promise because if anything happened to Chuck, she would feel as it was her fault. Serena says God doesn't want her marrying someone she doesn't love, and that Chuck and Louise think she's having an affair with Dan, and they'll out it unless she comes clean. Blair refuses, saying that she'll do anything to keep Chuck safe, even if it means pretending to be in love with having an affair with Dan Humphrey. And in the other room, Nate brings Dan, Louie, and Chuck together so they can find about the ad. After finding about the ad slide, Dan sees it and says that while he wishes he could say what he's doing with Blair, he can't. Chuck suggests they run the slide anyway, but Dan refuses. Chuck demands to know what they're doing, and before he can answer, Serena bursts in and announces, yeah, she and Dan are back together. That's what's in the slide. And says that Blair's been helping them cover it up because they want to be sure that it would work before they tell anyone. Dan agrees and, of course, plays along. Chuck leaves the room and Nate tells Dan he's serious remedial honest training. Louie goes out to find Blair, and Serena tells Dan that she knows what about Blair's deal, and the least thing she can do is help Blair live with her promise. And they go out to get drinks. So yeah, they're only at Juilliard. Rufus and Lily tracked at Juilliard of all places. Rufus tracks down Lily. Lily tracks down Lily. She explains that singing karaoke by himself got boring, so he asks Andrew Tyler where she is, who wouldn't reveal where Charlie was. So he hired him to track Lily down, which was when he admitted that Charlie isn't what at Juilliard. Lily says that she just wants to know where she's okay, and they decide to ask security about her. Before they can, Lily spots a blonde girl and calls out saying Charlie, but she turns around and Lily realizes she ain't Charlie. The girl says that she's looking for apologizes, and Lily says she's looking for Charlotte Rhodes. The girl says she's Charlie Rhodes, but people call her Lola. So, but Rufus says they're looking for a different Charlie Rhodes. So yeah, that's. Okay, I'm going to reveal it for later. I was going to reveal the whole big twist reveal, but no, I'm going to save it for later. So anyway, they are looking, that's Lola. And Rufus says they're looking for a different Charlie Rhodes. Lily realizes there may have been two of them, and they leave to go home. Back at the party, Louis finds Blair in the restroom, and he apologizes for not trusting her. He thought that she was having an affair with Dan, but Serena told him that Dan was just helping cover Dan Serena's relationship. Blair was just helping covering Dan and Serena's relationship, and Louis admits that she's further away from him than ever. Blair admits that her real secret is that she's converting to Catholicism, so that they can be married in a church. They leave to go celebrate with everyone else. Back at the party, Nate's assistant introduces him to Greg, the man who drove the car during the accident. Greg says they told the cops all he knows, which is what the photographers were very close to the car, but the real problem is that his brakes felt like they had no pressure, but checked them before the shift started. Meanwhile, Dan apologized to Chuck for not telling about him and Serena getting back together. Chuck says that while the relationship explains the sneaking around, it doesn't explain why Blair cut him out of her life. Dan swears he doesn't know, but Chuck doesn't believe him. Blair thanks Serena for keeping her secret, and Serena replies that she's willing to make the sacrifice, but she doesn't think Blair is making the right choice. Louis then shows up and encourages Serena to find Dan before midnight. The clock strikes midnight, and Giselle eats the poison apple and dies. Just kidding. Or Snow White eats that poison apple and then dies. But anyway, or just kidding. But change in Snow White references. But before Dan and Chuck longingly watched Blair and Louis kiss after the party, Nate explains to his assistant about the car service. Is sending an invoice that night over the article. He continues that Blair ordered the car, and now they just have to narrow down who knew she would be in it. Serena then comes in and tells Nate he was worried about Gossip Girl, and she plans to go through with all the emails and see if there are any positive way for her to use them. After the Vanderwoodsons, Rufus and Lily arrive home. Lily says that Lily did all she could to find for Charlie. Lily decides to let Carol deal with her daughter herself, and they go to do New York karaoke together. At the Empire, Blair goes to see Chuck. He asks what's going on and she says she came to tell him what one person's become, and he declares that he plans to do anything he can to find out why Blair cut him out. And she just says even though they can't be together, doesn't mean she won't love him and leave. In the last flashback, Chuck remembers Blair staying in the hospital, and then walking out of his room. At the Waldorf, Blair and Serena arrive and decide and decide to hang out and raid Jero's candy stash. Outside, Blair and Louis walk. Blair thanks him for letting him stop by the Empire, and then he stopped for a second outside the church. Louis asks if she's getting cold feet, and Blair replies that she's never made any other decision. She has never been more sure about any decisions in her life. Back at Juilliard, Lola is shown looking for ID. When she finds it, it's shown that, yeah, she's the real daughter of she's Carol's actual daughter. And she's Carol's actual daughter. At the Spectator, the car service invoice comes around. Nate reads through and realizes that Blair got in the wrong car, and the one that crashed was ordered for Nate. The text announced he didn't text the anonymous person and asked for help. He gets a reply, which is read on the Gossip Girl voice, that they should help each other. Okay, so we met the actual Charlie Rhodes in this episode, or as she likes to go by, Lola. So I wonder if the real Charlie will play a bigger role. So yeah, of course, Lily went looking for the fake Charlie, but ended up running into the real one, and thought maybe there's two Charlies. No, there's not. So now Carol's daughter is Carol's real daughter that she's been mentioning throughout the entire show has finally come into play. But I'll call her Lola because that's what people call her, and that's what they call her on the show. So we met Lola in the episode. We met Lola, the real daughter of Carol Rhodes. I kind of like her. I kind of like her. Like, literally, I like how her name is Lola. Like, literally, she is real Charlie She is the real Charlie Rhodes, but people call her Lola, so yeah, that's what she just goes by. So I'll just call her Lola for whenever she shows up. So Rufus and Lily went to find fake Charlie, but ended up finding real Charlie, but they don't know that's the real Charlie, so they're still trying to look for fake Charlie. So they're just going to let Lily handle things out. They're just going to let Carol handle her daughter, not knowing that the daughter Lily thinks she's talking about is the fake version of the identity stolen, is the person that's called the identity of Lola, the real Charlie. Or Ivy stole the identity of Lola. So so we learned that, yeah, Blair and Dan were not sleeping together. Dan was just helping Blair with getting into the church. Because she's afraid that the universe was telling, she prayed to God that she will stick with Lee if the God saves Chuck's life. So when that nurse came in, she told her that Chuck was alive, so Blair believed that God finally answered her prayers and saved Chuck. So she's only staying with Louis because she's afraid of Chuck. She doesn't want anything bad to happen to Chuck. So yeah, and it seems like Nate, the car that crashed was meant for Nate, not Blair and Chuck. So it seems like someone was trying to kill Nate that night. Who? Who knows? What will Lola play in the story as the real daughter of Carol? How will Ivy come back into the story? Now that we know that who the real Charlie is, now that we know that Ivy and Lola and Carol were all in the same theater production together. That's, I guess, how they all three know each other, and I guess Max knows her because they were all in the same theater group together. So yeah, this was episode 12, and in episode 11, the end of the affair. We got the introduction of Lola. Cool. She'll play a bigger part in the story. I wonder when Lola will be revealed as the real daughter. I wonder when the Vanderwoods will learn that, yeah, their cousin is really Lola Rhodes. So, yeah. But anyway, that's it for this video, and as the time is 29 minutes. I'll see you next time for Season 3, Episode 12. Episode 12, Father and the Bride. Wait, Father and the Bride or Father of the Bride? Father and the Bride. There. Father and the Bride. I'll see you next time for Father and the Bride. Yeah, you love me. XOXO, Gossip Girl. I just still can't believe we met the real Lola in this the real Charlie Rose in this episode.